Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Manufacturing Revival is a new era of Industry 4.0 in Australian manufacturing upon us. So let me introduce you quickly to myself. My name is Imran Khan from Salesforce, and I'm the Strategy Director for both manufacturing and FMCG. Before I start, let me please also first say, in the spirit of reconciliation, Salesforce acknowledges the traditional custodians of country for us, Australia, and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to our elders past and present, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We ourselves are very committed to the industry, and we're very keen for you to enjoy the session today. And I'm thrilled to have David Chuter, CEO and Manager of the Innovative Manufacturing CRC, otherwise known as IMCRC, and Eloise Roberts, Practice Director Advisory, Change and Training from Simplus Australia. They're joining our panel. I definitely have the shortest title here compared to these custodians. During today's discussion, we will share some key findings from the IMCRC futuremap workshops, explore the challenges manufacturers are facing around digital adoption, and look into future states of Australia's manufacturing industry. Before we kick off, I would love to hand over to our wonderful panelists, David and Eloise, for introductions. Let me first pass over to David.
Great, thanks Imran, and thanks so much for the opportunity to join today, and thanks for everyone for zooming in and videoing in. Look, I've been in manufacturing for around 30 years, a good 20 of that's been in Australia, mainly in the car industry, designing and making car interiors, seating and so on. And I've run SME businesses, so I guess a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is about how we take advantage of local manufacturing being quite popular and in vogue again, driven by COVID. Imran mentioned the IMCRC, just very in a nutshell, we're an organisation that invests Commonwealth funding into supporting research and development programs in the manufacturing sector. So we bring businesses and Australian universities and the CSIRO together to work on Industry 4.0, new technologies that will take manufacturing forward in Australia. And I'll tell you a little bit about one of the initiatives that we've driven over the last couple of years, futuremap, in a little bit. We've got a vision for Australian manufacturing to be thriving, relevant, and globally integrated. And I should also add to that in the context today, digital. Thanks, Imran.
Thank you. Over to you, Eloise.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks, guys, for having me. So look, I know that my title is very long, and my apologies, Imran, for that big mouthful. But realistically, my title is really exciting, Director of Advisory, Change and Training. So whilst I get to really help businesses across all industries realize and see what that digital transformation vision means for them, but it also means that I help them empower and comfort and strengthen their employees to really take on the challenge of change in their industry and build resilience within their teams.
Thank you very much, both of you. Now, let me just quickly jump to some housekeeping. We want this to be interactive, and we've got a question that we would love you to just add through this tool they're using. It's all anonymous. And basically, if you want to ask questions also throughout the webinar, please feel free to click that blue raise hand icon on the top right corner of the screen. And give us your thoughts of what keeps you up at night. We would love to understand, what you're worried about, in work, because that will really help guide us this conversation as we go through. And I also like to add, we are also committing to the industry, and Deakin University is running a fantastic research for this industry, first of its kind. And in the resources in this tool, you can get access to Deakin University survey link. It's a 15-minute link, and it'll give you the opportunity to share with them what's happening, and you'll get access to a great report. So that will help you understand the industry's point of view as well. So without further ado, hopefully all that makes sense. Let me first ask the first question to David. So David, can you please provide an overview for those that are unfamiliar with the futuremap tool you've come up with and how that's helping Australian manufacturers advance and transform their businesses?
Yeah, sure, Imran. And look, I might start with, what was keeping me awake at night when I came into this job with the world of Industry 4.0. Coming from manufacturing, I was very concerned that many people are selling software and hardware and technology solutions, but it's very hard to know what is right for your business. And the temptation is to see this world of Industry 4.0 and digital technologies as what you have to invest in. The caution that we've applied is very much, if you simply jump into the what without considering why it's important to you, in other words, how does it fit with the vision, your leadership, your culture, your customers, and also how you intend to invest in new technologies in terms of what's unique about your business model, then jumping into the what may well be at your peril. And so we developed an education awareness program that we called FutureMap. Effectively what FutureMap is, it's an online diagnostic tool that we run companies through in group events around the country. We've run, I think, 60 plus events nationwide, and we've had approaching 600 manufacturing businesses, a lot more in addition to just manufacturing, of which more than 500 have been small and medium businesses. So it's a unique database. But more importantly, it's been a process where, in addition to the diagnostic that companies do, we've been able to talk about exponential rates of change, the Internet of Things, new technologies, changes in business models, and the whole process is designed to raise the awareness of companies' understanding of Industry 4.0, but critically, how Industry 4 and digital technologies can drive value in their business. And effectively what companies do is, once they've been through this process, at the end of the session, they get a 2-page unique map of where their business sits today, and also where they said they want to be in 2 years from now. And of course, we've been able to aggregate all that data, and we've got some really interesting findings that I'll be happy to share with you. But just quickly, a copy of all of these slides will be available to participants if they want to access these. So this will all be freely available.
Fantastic. I love how you've constructed a framework to help, I guess, manufacturers come in uncharted territory. So it's a great way. So I guess since you've launched FutureMap in 2018, I believe, you've mentioned already you've had 60 nationwide events, 600 manufacturing businesses have attended, which is a great participation rate. Could you please share some of the key trends then that you have that have emerged from these sessions, and any interesting insights that you've uncovered from holding these workshops?
Yeah, I'd love to, Imran, and there's some good insights that come out of it, because this has not been a benchmark. It's not been a good versus bad or right versus wrong. It's what companies have said that where they think their businesses are. And so what we do, you'll see on the picture there, we chart a holistic view of how businesses are going, all the way through for how do they position themselves in their market, how do they approach leadership, strategy, change, culture, the environment, sustainability, and then into a world of, understanding improvement, innovation, technology uptake, and then we get into that newer world of digitalization, Industry 4.0. What do companies know, and where are they on their Industry 4.0 journey? And effectively, when we aggregate all those results, we end up with an aggregated spider chart. Just quickly to explain, the purple line is what all of these 500-600 companies look like when you average them out and aggregate their results. And that is their current honest state of maturity and capability. The blue line is where they have said they need to be or have an ambition to be in 2 years from the point where they did their survey. And 2 years is important because COVID's shown interesting findings. I've just put some numbers on here. When you aggregate the difference between where companies are today and where companies are saying they need to be or want to be, the biggest gap or the biggest opportunity for them is around the utilization of Industry 4 digital technologies, followed very quickly by learning a lot more about Industry 4.0 itself. What was also pleasing to see is that a lot of companies recognize that boosting their leadership and management capabilities is also a significant area of opportunity for them. And then digitalization comes in as a quick force. So you can see that whole digital Industry 4 is very much in demand, and companies are saying they really need to get on this journey. At the other end of the scale, interesting enough, we see technology utilization as quite a low gap. And I think that's because a lot of companies aren't quite sure yet which technology to invest in, what's right for their business. And then perhaps disappointingly, global supply chain positioning, getting into the world, exporting, companies actually have quite a low ambition in that space. So that's basically how these aggregate results work. And what I suggest you do as I go through the next few slides is just to think where your business sits and whether this resonates with you. Again, it's not a right or wrong, but where do you sit in this world as I go through these? One of the things we do gather data on is how digitalized companies are. And pleasingly, many companies are actually a lot more digitalized than they might think they are if they've embraced things like Office 365 or Salesforce or Dropbox or Box. They're already in the cloud. They're using these type of solutions. Many are using computer-aided design. Many are using their own versions of ERPs and MRPs. But interesting enough, as you drop down the utilization, very few companies are embracing things like augmented reality, virtual reality, product lifecycle management. Not that many are in design. And those are some of the real opportunities. We're all engaging in arguably a virtual world now. And so this has been a really big change. So the question is, what are the barriers for adoption that companies are seeing? I want to tease out a few more quick findings. When we look at the marketplace, what we're finding is that half of the companies are honest enough to say they have products or services that have uniqueness that creates value. The worrying bit is, what are the other half doing in terms of creating new products and services? 2/3 have commented that and agreed that they have the opportunity to increase a range of services they provide beyond simply being a producer of products. And I think that's a huge opportunity that COVID is accelerating. I mentioned the disappointing side about engaging with global supply chains, and I don't think we should be looking at making everything in Australia or not buying from overseas. We need to find what is the right balance, and I think there's still a huge opportunity for export opportunities. When you look at leadership, pleasingly 40% of companies say that they think they've got appropriate vision, strategy, and goals for their business. But only 15%, when they're honest enough, are saying they're actually communicating these and discussing these with employees. And so in a disruptive world, there's an element of change management that I think that has exposed a bit of a blind spot with many companies. And 2/3, again, are honest enough to say that actually their day-to-day business is very much run by operational or financial imperatives, whichever customer shouts loudest or if there's an issue or the cash management or whatever, and not enough of finding the time to spend on new strategy and technology and new collaborations. And when we look at innovation, for example, 2/3 of companies really pleasingly are saying they've got the capacity and capability to be more innovative, to think about breakthrough designs, breakthrough solutions, things that they can sell beyond simply continuous improvement. But 40% are honest enough to say they've got a range of barriers stopping them doing so, and time and access to skills is a big part of that. And finally, technology investments so far has been primarily around productivity and process improvement. It hasn't yet been about new markets and new services. And then finally, when you look at digital and Industry 4.0, a rapidly increasing number of companies are really aware of Industry 4.0. They've heard about the technologies, maybe they've actually seen them in action, but less than 1/3 of them are honest enough to say they're actually talking about this and developing plans in their leadership and management and team meetings. So there's a gap there, and less are aware of how this can actually create value. So that's the gap we need to close. 20% or less have a well-defined digital strategy, and again, that's a big opportunity for companies to embrace digital and technology strategies. A little soundbite that also has come out just for information is that more employees are driving companies to push for new digital technologies than customers are. Now, that may well change, but if you're not listening to the voice of your employees, perhaps you're leaving them behind on the journey that you need to be taking them on. So just some key findings, but hopefully will stimulate some thoughts and some discussions with those attending and that we can talk about.
Thank you. Well, what I kind of gathered when I saw those 4 sections is this is not something you turn on. This is a fundamental shift in how you operate, and it's not just technology. I love your comment that employees internally are driving some of that push up. I mean, everyone, I'm at home, I'm in Melbourne, I'm in lockdown, like yourself, David. You know, you use the technologies and ease as a consumer. You know, I can order something on the phone today and it'll be there by tomorrow, if not later today, if I use Amazon. Then you sometimes go to companies and you start using paper again. And that kind of mental transition is like, you go, even though it's B2B, why do I have to do that? It feels like you're going backwards in time. So look, I think it's fascinating, and it's really important that it's, you know, the concept Industry 4.0 is just as fundamentally internally with your employees and internal collaboration as it is on the external side. It's not on one side of the coin. it's a transformation. So I have heard IMCRC in your group have been quoting that other Australian manufacturers understand the concept. So this concept you're showing of 4.0, the challenge is they're less confident in understanding direct benefits it can give them. It's more conceptual. I think the stats are only 35% recognize the competitive advantage it can give them. So how would you address this? What do you believe is the underlying benefits for the majority of businesses out there?
Yeah, no, Imran, you make an excellent observation that it's easy to be wowed by the technology and it's easy to be wowed by those selling the technology. But it's critical to understand the value this can bring to your business, not just your customers, but your employees. What's going to motivate and engage them. And so it comes back to what I talked about earlier, being the why and the how before you invest in the what. And also whom, whom is your partner? Who do you buy this from? Who do you partner with? I think one of the challenges, I think back to my experience in manufacturing, this digital world is often invisible. It's bits and bytes that you can't see. It's not tangible. And for most manufacturers, I love nothing more than seeing how a machine works or seeing how things are made. And so what it drives you is you can't necessarily visualize or see the outcomes in a tangible way that you're used to. And so the return on investment that you may be considering around investment in digital technologies probably needs to be measured differently from how you do it today. There are lots of technology solutions out there. There are lots of people, lots of companies already embracing. The key thing, I think, is finding out which one is right for your business, but also learning about what others are doing. I do worry that not enough are out there reaching out to others. Other businesses, we all seem to think we compete against each other, and actually our competition is generally overseas. We don't tend to go knocking on the door of universities to see what these technologies look like or what smart ideas can be. And we're also a bit nervous about bringing consultants in because we worry they're trying to sell as opposed to help, and that may not actually be the case. So I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding of some of the barriers to entries, and often companies can be quite inward-looking and not outward-facing enough. And they're also probably not making the time by design to look at how they invest. What we are seeing, however, is that those that even pre-COVID were on this journey are already seeing many direct benefits, as well as lots of indirect benefits, employee engagement, attraction. There's been interesting publication from Alpha Beta that I saw this morning. A new report coming out of the COVID period, which is saying that there is more technology investment being made this calendar year since COVID struck than many companies have made in the last 10 years. And the interesting insight to that is those that are investing and those that have been demonstrated to be more resilient to challenges like COVID. They've been able to protect and grow their employment. They're more profitable, and they've got a much better platform to spring out of the other end of COVID. It's a strong message.
It is. And I know in March it was more toilet roll sold in 2 weeks than the last 52 weeks as well at the beginning of COVID. And I'll pass over to Eloise as well. Do you have anything to add to this point? Is this consistent with what you're seeing with all the customers you speak to?
Yeah, and look, I'm loving this, guys. Hearing all about how important employees are, managing accelerated adoption. Oh my gosh, music to my ears. This is amazing. And I do think that this whole disruption that COVID has brought into our lives has created this wonderful burning platform to really incite companies and encourage companies to change and make that leap into whatever digital transformation means for them. And that's certainly something that I've been seeing in my conversations with clients across all industries, not just manufacturing. But I think it's really changed the conversation around digital transformation from, it's a nice to have and we can see some of the benefits. There's a bit of a value proposition to, oh my gosh, we need to do this to survive. It's not only about can we survive in the next 12 years without moving onto a digital platform, but now it's like, well, does our business model stand up for the next 6 months? And it's really created that platform to consider what they need to do from here on in.
Perfect. And I think, David, I didn't know this till like 2 days ago when we chatted that the word manufacturing has Latin origins to mean hand and make. So it's fundamentally a physical thing. And the idea of digital, which is not always physical, and the business models where you can make money with data, it's different to, I guess, the traditional. So, there is that kind of level of something very fundamentally different, ingrained from how the industry has been so successful, and rightly is, and will continue to be. So it's an interesting insight. So I guess based on that too, we know that digital adoption and innovation of business process can be difficult as building blocks for success if they're not laid out properly. Futuremap insights show some great success is heavily dependent, on company culture. So it's not just the technology, it's the culture to see the innovation. It's often driven from the employees, not always from the customers. So I guess I'll go to Eloise first on this. Do you have some practical advice or something the audience can take back as, one thing to do, whether it's about starting their journey or they already have been innovating or maybe have stalled, they may be having issues or adoption or proving value. So Eloise, as your role in cultural change, let's start with you. What constructive advice would you offer?
Sure. And look, Imran, I've got a list of about 1,000 things that I could possibly say here. But I think one of the tools that we use a lot at the moment is heat mapping, and understanding and trying to put into a one single view the amount of change that's happening from a persona perspective on that one person or that one persona or that one role in a business. How much are we actually asking them to adopt and be proficient at one particular time? And this has also become quite serious as well because of all the outside influence, the disruption in the environment, changes to the way we work fundamentally, let alone asking to change tools and ways you interact with clients or customers. So I think a heat map where if you're making changes from a transformation perspective, introducing a CRM or introducing an ERP, it's great to jot that on a timeline. How many personas are regularly being asked to change the way they work on a day-to-day basis in the first 6 months? How we can possibly change that timeline a little bit so that the impact and the changes isn't so high, continuing on and on. That's my first. That's my first tool. And, change fatigue is real, especially when there's been such a change curve happening across the board this year. So we do need to kind of help our employees through that. And I'll have one more, I promise, Imran, just one more. Your ROI calculations don't have to be just financially based. It's really important to expand the scope of that. Be creative. Think about the ways that you can improve your return on investment and improve your business model by mapping out an employee journey. And seeing where the touch points are with particular tools, with particular clients, how that interacts and where those opportunities are. I know, David, yesterday when we were talking, you were talking about how Dominos have actually mapped that out and that employee and customer journey, and were able to apply bots to the process so that they were able to predict on a particular night when more staff would need to be put on to deliver pizzas.
Yeah, it's a great example. I mean, how is pizza boxes and pizzas, affected by Industry 4.0 and digital? But Domino's are one of the companies leading the way in this space and partnering with people like Busy who are making the boxes. Domino's are using data from a very wide range of sources, weather patterns, television schedules, particularly reality TV, school patterns, lockdowns, travel. Parent behaviors, to predict what orders they are going to receive weeks in advance. And it's early days, but the AI modeling is already proving more accurate than all of the management experience they've got. And it doesn't mean that people are out of the equation, but what it means is that the data can be used to really consider how you prepare your business, how you sell more product, but how you can support capacity. And so, it's an interesting, digital adoption is very much about the future of work. And if you didn't believe this before COVID, the evidence is much clearer now. And so embracing, Industry 4.0, or to put it more loosely, the digitalization of manufacturing industry is effectively about embracing the future of work. It isn't just about the technology. Yes, Industry 4 describes a range of key enabling technologies that will continue to evolve. This includes 3D printing, assistive technologies, robotics, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality is a new phrase, new materials, software, cloud computing. And as these continue to evolve, you add to this artificial intelligence, machine learning. There's lots of new phrases out there. But it's also critically about the integration in real time of people, machines, and things. That is the real-time integration of people, machines, and things. And if people are not at the core of any investment, we're going to miss the opportunity to get the best outcomes. And also, dare I say, we're not providing pathways for meaningful work and purpose for generations and our kids to come. And it's almost every case I've seen where manufacturing businesses around the country and in New Zealand and other markets around the world have embraced these technologies. The people have not just been critical to adoption, the technology has actually enhanced what people are actually able to do. And in most cases, they're loving it. So one further point that you do hear is that companies say a lack of access to skills is holding them back. But if you're after digital talent, you'll most likely be looking at a younger generation that's known nothing other than the internet and social media. So you've got to think about what it is they're looking for and how do you attract them to your business. What matters to them? What are the challenges? How do they collaborate? What technology? Their focus on community and sustainability. How do you attract them to your business to secure the skills and talent? And so connecting with schools and universities is probably a great way to get on this journey. But you've got to think about the people side of things as you jump into technology.
I love that point. And there's some stats I've got files to present. So from 1997, anyone born from then doesn't know a world without internet or the connected world. And also in Australia, by 2024, there'll be more millennials in the workforce than all previous generations put together because of natural retirement coming in. So they will have a big say in the workforce. And, you've made a point, the war of talent. It's not just do you need to go to the content industry 4.0 to grow business outwards. To get the right talent, a lot of the new generations are very focused on values and traceability. And we discussed this the other day. They look at companies that represent their values. And if they see companies going from sustainability and other things to do good, we say, we're very proud that Salesforce say, the business of business is to do good. It's the greatest platform for change, and manufacturers are a great platform that can also achieve that, and that will drive talent to you. So it's a myriad of key points. I think you made a great point on that. So David, I want to ask you then a question then we touched on, then how critical will be data and I guess service models moving forward for this industry? How can manufacturers become more data-driven organizations and create new business models that probably haven't thought about, which is more connected with not only their customers and end users, but their employees as well?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I mean, look, COVID has shown how businesses can, dare I say, use that cliched word now, pivot, all right? But the reality is many businesses, including in manufacturing, were already doing this well before COVID. A critical part of that is understanding, I see the difference between what your business is, what do you do as a business, and what your business model is, and what could a new business model be that could be enabled by smart thinking together with the use of data technology. And so when I ask companies, what have you thought about the difference in your business and your business model? They have to pause for thought, but it can be quite transformational. And data is critical. Think of my example with Dominos, for example, and then think of your own business. What data would help you manage your suppliers better? What about your customers? What if you could track and gather data throughout the lifetime of how your products or services are used by business or consumers?
Yeah.
Even knowing when your products reach the end of its life. It's all possible now, and it's only going to be made more possible with the Internet of Things, 5G technologies, data analytics. The airlines have done this for a long time, tracking the performance of jet engines while they're up in the air in real time. Formula One cars do this throughout their races. Tesla cars do this in the real world. Michelin makes tires for trucks with microchips in them that constantly send back feedback on how the tires are performing, their pressure, the road condition. And guess what? They've now got all this data that tells them how to design better tires, but more importantly, selling to the councils on the condition of the roads, how the trucks are being used. They know more about that ecosystem than probably the trucks or the roads. So it is possible now to have a kind of an ongoing relationship with what you make and sell. The key for me is, what do you do with all that data? Is it better design? Is it new service offerings? Is it upgrades, end-of-life management? How can you predict using the data what's going to happen? Domino's in 3 weeks will know how many pizzas they've got to make. Data is kind of the new gold, as you hear, but gold is not easy to mine, all right? You've got to get through an awful lot of other rock to find that little nugget that tells you what it is. And in a similar way with futuremap, we're a little SME business. We've gathered all this data. We've had to work out what to do with it. It's been an interesting lesson for us as an SME to see the value in data that you didn't think you might get at the outset.
Awesome. We have a saying, how do you get the signals from the noise? It's like a concept of a lot of like data, but you have to pick the signals at the right time, and that's where we can help. Eloise, love your point of view on this too.
Yeah, sure, Imran. And look, I know that we've spoken a lot about employees, and I am going to keep harping on it because it is something that's super important. And that customer lens and that focus on gathering data from customers is just as important with employees. Being able to measure their speed to adoption, their proficiency, their engagement rates, that's all super important to ensuring that your business transformation is successful. Because without those three things, your vision of digital transformation will continue to just be a vision. You really need to bring your employees along that journey and make sure that the services, the process, the opportunities that you're providing through digital technology is also backed up by speed of adoption. And it means that your employees come in and have a really great business as usual experience. What we really like to do in my team as well is not only come up with customer strategy and customer journey mapping, but we do a lot of employee mapping as well and seeing what that journey looks like. Coming from a service perspective, a people and a technology perspective, pulling all those three together is a great way to not only utilize your data, but really understand the gaps and the opportunities where you can really focus on in your business. By having those mapped out, it's really easy to see where you can spend your time, where you can add more value, and most of all, where to spend your budget to improve your business cases. Yeah.
Awesome. And I guess to David's point, your point, we're all in this together. No one needs to do this by themselves. There's enough support groups and, frameworks and people that can help on the journey. Now, another very traditional conversation that happens is, manufacturers traditionally kind of B2B2C, and there's been all this conversation of the concept of direct to consumer as well strategies, which hasn't been the traditional mode. I guess I'll start with you, David, but what are your thoughts on manufacturers closing that loop on the consumer data and understanding consumers? The whole idea of new product development is the consumers who are using the end products, and even for OEMs, they're kind of part of that journey, but the data from the end users helps drive more, relevancy. Is no longer at the behest of the intermediaries. What's your views on that, David?
I think, in short, Imran, it's a huge opportunity for Australian manufacturers, and in fact for businesses generally. The internet and social media allows anyone now to connect to anyone else, direct to consumers, businesses. And so I think, I use the phrase shifting from being an order taker to being an order maker. And to do that, you've got to work through a different business model and what's the uniqueness of that business model. Look, I'm not going to go into the example now in the essence of time, but for those of you online, go and look up after this a company called Stage Kings, all right, and see how they've transformed to take advantage of COVID by making home desks and office solutions from a company that made products for stages and shows in the theatre. So Stage Kings, wow. Go and look it up. New services, working out who your new customers to be. I think the simple message right now, and the COVID's shown it, is that if you are not developing and selling through digital channels and connecting direct with those who use your products or services, you're being left behind. It's a simple message.
Perfect. And Louise, do you want to add anything, or are you happy with David's response on that one?
I don't think I need to add anything. That was a really great response, David. You've left me speechless. Never has that happened before.
So I know we've touched on COVID, and there's been some good examples from both of you on that. But is there anything else you think COVID has had on speed and prioritization, maybe in this framework, the futuremap framework of digital adoption? And how do you think that has impacted maybe the level of investment coming forward as businesses have been forced, to reduce expenses? Cash flow is being king, especially in the early stage where everyone's trying to work out what do we do, during this pandemic. Everyone's health and safety is number one priority, and businesses are also adapting to survive and grow. Anything else you want to add due to that COVID, overlay?
it's been an extraordinarily hard time for many businesses, but it's also been a time of opportunity and growth for many. My personal lesson out of the global financial crisis was be countercyclical. Invest far more heavily in your people, develop new things like design engineering, and be countercyclical when times are tough. You've got to invest in the things that create value for your business, your people, your customers, your suppliers, your assets. I think another thing that COVID's driven is we're seeing a lot more collaboration happening. We don't do that very well in Australia. I'll just be blunt about that. But we've seen, give an example, people like Coles and Woolworths collaborate on how do we make sure supermarket shelves aren't empty. So even collaborating in competition, I think, is a really smart way to come up with new business models and to find a way out of COVID and do that. And I think also helping others in your supply chain, that there is this overused phrase, we're all in this together, but by clustering together, I think there's some new business models that technology can enable. And I think there's some smart companies already doing that and on the journey.
Perfect. I think the biggest phrase at the moment is you're on mute. I think it's winning in 2020, but there's a few behind there as well. Eloise, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, and I think the message that I'm hearing a lot is that sometimes it's just overwhelming when you're being forced into the position of moving onto the cloud in a situation where the environment is super dynamic. You've had to reduce, maybe your staff, cost. As you said, cash is king, and that is really important at the moment. It is easy to be overwhelmed with how much is out there, Industry 4.0, what does that actually mean? Do you have to buy the entire suite of everything? What's actually important? So that can be quite overwhelming. What I would suggest is to chunk it down, be bite-sized. Don't take on the world all at once. Work out what the minimum viable product is for your business. And phase it out so that your first phase really sets you up and bankrolls phase 2 and phase 3. Work out where the value is for your business and move from there. It is really important not to get analysis paralysis and just continue to kind of not be able to move because there's so much out there to view. Plan in bite-sized chunks.
Awesome. Look, I'm very proud of this industry and also the consumer goods industry because during COVID, a lot of the manufacturers pivoted an effort to help with the health crisis, to make PPE that they were manufacturing or make sanitizers. Yep. I'm very proud of, and all manufacturers stepped up and were also helping the community and the government cause. So, this industry has really led the way from that as well. So we shouldn't forget that at the same time as well. At times of trouble, this industry put its hand up and has provided a lot of support when needed for nurses with PP, for example. So thank you for your support on that as well, and ongoing support. So I guess we have one last question. We'll move to Q&A. But I love this question. What do you believe, and maybe I'll start with David on this one, are the biggest challenges you feel are facing manufacturers in the next 2 to 3 years, and who do you see as the disruptors?
Yeah, I think around, look, before I go on to the negative, just look at the opportunity we have. Right. Local manufacturing, supporting communities is in vogue, dare I say fashionable. We're all talking about it, and people are now buying from other companies. So it's a generational opportunity that we have to really build something of scale in Australia. I think the challenges are that the rate of technology is not slowing down. It continues to go exponential, and we're seeing companies all the time coming up with new data-driven digital business models. There's a rapid change, and COVID has only accelerated further in the way consumers and businesses engage and buy. We're all doing it at home. I think a challenge is being too short-term focused. In many cases, the long game is the winning game, but it's understandable keeping your eye on your cash flows and your employees today. The shift to service models enabled by data, I think is a big difference. What can you do in addition to services on top of what you make? And I think the other challenge for most companies is simply just keeping up to date with everything that's going on. Where do I learn about this? How do I get on the journey? How do I best invest? And so I think one of the key opportunities is for business leaders and business managers, I think it's really at the leadership level, to close the gap on understanding what value and what business models they could create out of the new technologies and digital data, and knowing the difference between what your business does and what your business model could be and what's unique about that. I think in terms of disruptors, look, I mean, it'll be different for most companies, but assume that it may well come from outside of your industry, I think is a good way to plan and think. Digital platforms that change the way products and services are designed, made, and distributed. You know, you've seen a bunch of restaurants set up Providor. I mean, you've just seen a very different business model bypassing Uber Eats, for example. And so you're seeing all this competition in the marketplace. I think the other thing is key is working out who you do this with. Businesses who don't collaborate, I think, are going to be left behind. But there's a fantastic opportunity right now to invest in local design, engineering, manufacturing and supply chains. But good business models must prevail at the end of the day, and solutions have got to be competitive.
Fantastic. I've used Providor, amazing experience. And when I see the customer, I always say, you know, this disruption, and you know, we've rattled off lots of acronyms like IoT, AR, MI, and eventually people go, oh, this feels too hard. I always say, start with the simplest, basic approach. How can you operate in a more efficient, simple way and be more customer or consumer focused? And how can you make your life easier and their life easier? If you stick to those principles, you don't want to make it easier for your customer by adding more overhead to yourself or vice versa. So the Magic Quadrant is you improve life in your side or make things simpler, at the same time making it simpler on the other side of the equation. The famous example is Uber makes it easier for someone to become a taxi driver and it makes it easier for the person to use a taxi. It's an easy one that everyone can understand the concept. So there's some great questions coming out, and you know, we've just hit perfectly. Please start answering questions, David. You're very in demand. There's a question that's come up for you, David. Let's start first one. You mentioned 40% of businesses have barriers to move to the Industry 4.0. Are you able to drill down on some of those barriers and how these might have been addressed?
Yeah, it's a great question. Barriers can be multiple. It depends really on, I think, many things, where your business sits, how long you've been around, what legacy equipment you have. A lot of Industry 4.0 is very, I wouldn't say very, is much easier to apply when you're setting up a new facility, a new manufacturing line, going greenfield. The challenge a lot of companies have is we're very heavily invested in Australia, and so doing this it's a legacy equipment, and how to get, even in your factory, getting machines talking together, having digital flows between warehouses and so on is a real challenge. I think so. Time is one of those. It's making the time. Two, building a trust with solution providers, you know, equipment and technology providers, particularly in the IT space. You've got to find someone that you can trust, and almost part the catalog that they want to put on the table to work out and ask them, where do you think this is going to create value for my business? For a lot of companies, it might be, I don't have anyone in my business that's familiar with this today, and where do I access those skills? And the other one is just a knowledge, and hence why I come back to this concept of collaboration and sharing between companies, what is working, what's not working. Universities are also a great place to go to. Many of them have a lot of the equipment, a lot of the IT solutions on display for you to touch and feel and try, at no risk and at no compulsion to then buy that particular solution. So I think it merits. The big one still, however, will remain cash. But often many of these IT solutions aren't a capital purchase. They may be a subscription model, and therefore the cost to you may be a lot less than you think. I'd flip it the other way and say, what is the cost to you of not embracing this? And is your business going to be disrupted and left behind? So you've got to look at the cost and investment both ways in terms of your time, your resource, the cash, and who you work with.
Fantastic. I have a friend who's got a startup, and I know they use and you're right, capital-intensive purchases have been traditional, but the subscription-based model can change the adaptability. There's a few more questions. There's another one saying there's so many technologies out there. How do you suggest we cut the noise from and focus? Is that futuremap?
Futuremap will help, and in the pack you'll be able to download. There's a link to, if you'd like to attend a Futuremap event, you're very welcome. This is not a sell for Futuremap. Futuremap would help. We do describe some of these technologies, but we don't focus deep on it. What we do is we push companies to do a bit of their own homework. the CSIRO has a really fantastic document called the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Roadmap that was written 2 or 3 years ago. And it describes many of these key enabling technologies, not just in terms of the technology, but the smarts about the CSIRO document. It describes what you can do with that technology, all right, how it can create value. And again, that's the secret sauce with a lot of this. Again, go to universities, and the internet is a great source. I'm astounded by LinkedIn and Facebook and other social media platforms, how people that are in competition with each other are freely telling the world what they're doing, what they're investing in, what they're buying, how things are working. If you're not using that as part of your market intelligence, then I suggest get onto the social media and find out what your industry and your competitors are doing.
I was speaking to a big manufacturer that sell power tools in Australia, and they were saying they want to show off what they're doing because with the war on talent, they want to show their company that they're thinking forward, so the right talent will come to them. So part of the equation is not hide what you're doing, because by showing you're innovating and you're thinking, you draw the talent that comes to you. So that's another kind of consideration. I thought that was very insightful. There's another question here on how do you navigate the overwhelming options of information that a manufacturer presented with and seeking, IT platforms? Do you have any suggestions or framework to help overcome and navigate this information overload when you're making investments on platforms?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to give help or advice on how do you navigate, because the list of providers and this list of technologies carries on growing all the time. I guess what I find is really important is if you can take the time to look at a digital and a technology strategy, in other words, a short, medium, long-term plan for not just the technology, but what it will do for your business, what it enables, what it allows you to do that you couldn't otherwise do today. How does it allow you to maybe keep up with competition or get ahead of them? And I keep coming back to, what does it do to enhance value? How can you capture value in your business, i.e. to save money, improve productivity? This might be sensors to manage energy, for example. It might be warehouse management solutions. It might be other productivity improvements that actually are just part of that lean efficiency, continuous improvement journey. And then you look at things like the Internet of Things and services and data-driven models, which could change your business completely in terms of how you go to market. So I don't think there's an easy solution to say, how do you tackle it? You've just got to be very clear. And the question I'd be asking, and I probably should have been better at asking when I was running companies, is, look, that's great. I understand how the technology works. Can you give me some examples of where this has created value beyond simply the use of that technology? What's it going to do for my people? What's it going to do for my data? What's it then an enabler for, in addition to simply a nice smart technology that I can apply? And get whoever you're looking to maybe work with or buy from to kind of put it in that value proposition for you. Because at some point you're gonna have to go to your board or your bank and say, I need some money to invest in this, and they're probably going to ask those same questions.
100% agree. It's about the value.
David.
Go ahead, Eloise.
Sorry, Imran. Look, I completely agree. Really look at providers and partners that can offer you things outside of just implementing technology. You really need that whole package of advisory, strategy, how to look at your customer journey and your customer strategy. You really need someone to help you with adoption and understand what that looks like. It's that end-to-end package with all that comfort wrapped around it. It's not just implementing technology.
Yeah. I might also add that there's another thing that we're seeing out there a bit more and more, and COVID's driven this a little bit, is companies working together. That might be going to visit a university hub or something where you can do projects together. But let me give you an example. I'm sure if you had 10 metal forming companies that all say we're all in competition with each other, but actually a shared problem they may all have is visibility of the raw materials coming to them through the supply chain. So why wouldn't you divide and conquer and say, hey, maybe we group together, maybe we invest together in how we put some digital technology in managing the raw materials coming to us and how we manage our warehouses. That's probably not how they compete, all right? How they compete is probably on the forming side and the quality and the reliability. And so if you can find ways where you're not in competition, but it's worth investing together, you can tackle problems in clusters, in groups. And I think that's going to be a really important solution. Right now, even if you wanted to buy a new piece of equipment from overseas, under COVID, it's challenging. How do you get it here? How do you get it commissioned? How do you spec it? You can't go on a plane and visit it. So we've actually got to be driven towards different ways of working together. And I think a smart way of investing in these solutions is maybe to collaborate with others who you might have considered as competitors.
Totally agree. And with SMB companies, small companies, this is not always a big bang. You want to start on the journey, and you don't want to. You may have a North Star, but you want to take sometimes small steps and learn, because this is a journey. So finding the partners that can help you on the journey, and as you progress, because it's also a muscle that you haven't flexed, so you're growing that at the same time. So I know a lot of customers are worried, if I'm going to do this transformation, do I have to have a big bang and have so many different things to worry about? It's probably more about the principles you want to get to, and then take small steps with the partners together in your time. So pick the right software partners, and as such, they can help grow with you and help you grow, because it's something you have to invest your time in, because it's something you're evolving to, rather than just buying and using, I would say. There's another great question. I know we can't get close to time, but I want to definitely ask this one to you, David, is, there's a shift in investment in technology for product production process versus business process. How can manufacturers balance this trade-off?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what are the value drivers of your business today? Have you really competed by being an incredibly efficient, smart, high-quality converter of materials, assembler, manufacturer, if you like, a producer? Or have your smarts been in more, look, I make this, but actually really why I'm engaged with my customers is because I do design, I do the engineering, I understand specs, or I manage the logistics. I have a service platform out there. I have an app that goes with the product I sell. The reality is that if you're simply focusing on just the production element, you're probably not differentiating yourself enough from other businesses in terms of uniqueness. And you might be competing very much on cost, which is the risk. There's a bit of a race to the bottom with that. What we and many others are trying to get companies to look at is, how do you compete on value and increasing the range of services you provide? And I think that's where the digital investment with the people will generate a whole bunch of new ideas. I also love the concept of, start small and get going. I'm as guilty as anybody. I remember doing, for most manufacturers, stock takes, if you're like me, they're the bane of your life, that you have to provide, Saturday working, time and a half, free pizzas, and the number is going to be wrong at the end of it, and you're going to have a stock write-off. And I remember people saying to me, "Hey, David, wouldn't it be easier if we had half a dozen iPads out in the business and we could actually do the stock take and get rid of all this paper?" And my immediate reaction was, one, well, you probably need to go and talk to the finance manager because they look after IT, and two, I don't want iPads broken. I don't want people on Facebook. I don't want people playing with the numbers, and it's an investment to make. And I look back on that as a real error of judgment as a CEO to say I probably dampened or squashed any enthusiasm in the business to embrace digital solutions for the next 2 or 3 years. And actually letting half a dozen iPads out to the workforce, who knows where that might have gone very quickly in terms of ideas coming from the people. Because one of the things that with technology, we're all using this technology at home. You can buy, Imran, you've got a 3D printer in your office there at home. Our kids are using virtual reality. We're all on social media. We're using digital platforms all the time, augmented reality. And yet when you go to the workplace, perhaps we're not allowing our employees enough to exercise that and allow us to invest and adopt new technology and let them run, see what happens, and get some wins. Because those businesses that have really adopted digital successfully, it's no longer top-down driven by the leaders. The energy and momentum is now coming from inside the business and the employees, and there's a tipping point they reach.
I totally agree. And we're coming close to time, but if there's other questions anyone wants to ask, please do. I do also want to reiterate, as part of this investment, Deakin University is also running for the first time a survey to help gather some of this information and what really matters with all the new manufacturers out there. And then, from there, we'll share all that research for you, for the industry. And the plan is to review that each year. This is great, addendum to the great work that Dave is doing with futuremap as well. So, the investment is there, the appetite's there. We've got universities that are looking to understand better. And, we both, at IMCRC, Simplus Salesforce are here to commit to understand more of the industry and see how we can help you. But if there's any more questions, I know we're close to the hour, do ask. But I think it's been a great conversation. Both Eloise and David, really appreciate your time on this. And I hope the audience has found this to be very useful and informative. But shoot a question if you want the last minute or two. We'll wait for.
I might just add it in the if people download the sort of the slides, what you'll see is a bit of information there about other things that IMCRC can help. Have you thought about working with the university to get a student or a PhD on an internship into your business to tackle a data analytics project? Again, we provide funding for that. The world of universities is a really interesting one. They are very challenged with COVID, as you're probably reading about in the media. But I think a real opportunity for both the business community, manufacturers, and for universities is to get closer together. And I've been really pleasantly surprised at the quality and talent you find in the universities. If we can get more of that collaboration, and I think that's a good way to get some additional skill and get some projects and get going with the digital journey. And we can help with the cost of a bit of that. You'll see that in the pack that you can download.
Please go to resources, download futuremap, download the link. There's some great assets you can take from today as a next action at your speed, and reach out because there's some great groups, like David's organization there to help. So if there's no other questions, I can't see any other questions coming up. I guess we'll come to a close. And I hope everyone's enjoyed. Everyone stay safe and stay well. And for anyone in Melbourne, we're getting there. Things are looking good. So hopefully on Sunday we'll have a bit more freedom. But the most important thing is the safety and wellness of everyone as well. So thank you from me and David and Eloise as well.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks and well done, Imran.